Hey Makenna, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your Essay 2 draft. For this assignment, there are 4 main criteria that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the quality of your thesis statement, making sure that it's clear, that it's arguable, that it's got a reasonable argument that you're making. I'm also taking a look at your support of that thesis statement, so using details from the murals, details from the Scioto Historical website, and the Beyond These Walls documentary. I'm also taking a look at how you've organized your ideas and how you're transitioning between them, not just keeping ideas grouped together, but having a reason why you're placing your ideas in one location as opposed to another. And finally, I'm taking a look at how you're integrating sources. So how are you working those into your paper rather than just kind of throwing them into your paper, if you know what I mean. I read your note about your essay that you're not too confident about where this is at, and I think you've got solid details to work with. I think you're definitely working with 2 murals that certainly work for this assignment, and I'll try and give you some feedback that can kind of nudge you in the right direction. I think the big issue, though, to be honest with you, is the thesis statement. I think you've got one of those arguments that the town went through a tough thing and then rebuilt, and there's not much to that. Of course it rebuilt. It kind of had to. But it's like, what are the values that help them rebuild? That is something that you might have some room to grow with. I know there's a few people in the class that are writing about the same exact murals, or they're writing about similar combinations of murals, and they are writing about how the murals project a sense of togetherness. Like, it was the togetherness idea that really helped the town rebound from a tragedy. So, like, you can have an argument about togetherness, but as far as like just arguing about rebuilding, but we just rebuilt, that's not really going to be an argument that's going to have much in the way of legs to get you where you need to be. So I think the thesis statement needs a fair bit of work. The writing is a little, I have notes over here on the side to myself just to remind me of things to mention to you. The writing is a bit funky here in the middle. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think you're going to end up probably revising this significantly anyhow. So, but if you read these 2 sentences out loud, they get kind of funky. I think this part of the thesis statement is really where there needs to be some working. Really, these 2 sentences should be together. For an assignment of this size, you should have one single sentence that serves as your thesis statement. But it's like, it looks like you have 3 attempts here at a thesis statement. It's like facing a great tragedy and rebuilding after all it's over, and the kind of growing stronger. I mean, you might have an argument with the growing stronger idea, but that's going to be a tough one. Because really, what is the visual evidence for the fact that the town grew stronger? Like, in the conclusion, you mentioned that there are more businesses that are opened, but in the Flood of 37 mural, there's a number of signs for different businesses that are just flooded. So that might not go anywhere. I think, again, the idea of togetherness, unity, pride, there's a number of concepts like that folks are writing about, and I would suggest those to you. And there's others that you can find, but take a good look at those murals and ask yourself, what are they really kind of saying about this town? What kind of town are the murals describing? What kind of adjective, if the murals were to use an adjective, what kind of adjective would they use about Portsmouth? It's a tough town. It's a gritty town. I think you've got evidence for that in some of the murals. So think about, like, what are these murals really trying to say about the town? But that thesis statement really does need a fair bit of rethinking. It doesn't mean that you scrap colors for your body language, setting. You may have to cut 1 or 2 of those. It does mean that you'll need to re-explain or explain differently, like how the colors are trying to do what. And it's that what that needs to get figured out going forward. Once you figure that out, you'll need to explain, like, why you're beginning paragraph. Like, if you decide to begin with the colors paragraph, there needs to be a reason why you have it. You might be hinting at it with a striking difference, like it's the most significant difference between the 2. You need to explain that a little bit more. But there should be a reason why you're beginning with colors as opposed to body language or setting or what have you. Okay. You have a note here about not being able to put websites at the bottom of the photos. I did it here. I think making these changes on or adding your captions and adding your images when you're at a school computer is probably the way to go. We have full versions of Word. Probably won't allow you to do it in the version of Word that comes with like that the Outlook 365 or something like that. Mobile Word or Google Docs, it won't allow you to do that. So I think figuring this out on a campus computer, I think that's probably the way to go. As I mentioned, the thesis needs to get changed, or it needs some rethinking. And then when you're in your body paragraphs and you're using details to kind of talk about, using details to support your thesis, at the end of, you'll have an example, and then there should be some kind of discussion about that example that explains how it relates to the bigger idea of the paragraph or to the paper's thesis statement as a whole. Here we just kind of end, it's like it's upbeat, shows a nice livelier atmosphere just from the colors alone. The scenery shows more detail, or shows more deals. Not sure what that means, but I think the colors are more upbeat. I think that's a fair observation. I do think you need to be more specific about what those colors are and describing them in much more detail. But what is the overall point of having those really upbeat colors? Like, what's the connection there to the bigger idea that your paper is going to have? That needs to happen in the body paragraphs. The opening sentences in your paragraphs, like this one right here, they should kind of suggest like where the where the paragraph is going to go and how it's going to support your thesis. Right now, it just says that the murals are different, and your paper isn't really just about their differences. It's about something hopefully bigger that the murals are suggesting about the town. So that first sentence would be much more helpful if you're one, transitioning from the previous paragraph, and then two, you're explaining how the overall paragraph is going to help support your thesis. I think here, when I've read your draft a couple times, and it felt like when I got to here, it was like, all right, I'm not sure Makenna's too comfortable with like the overall idea that she has here. It feels like you're kind of like, I don't know, maybe it could be this. And so, like, there's no shame in kind of realizing that, hey, maybe my thesis isn't working out. And I think working with me or working with a Writing Center tutor, we can help you get a thesis statement that you're comfortable with. Doesn't mean you have to scrap the entire essay. I do think you need to use more detail in places. Like you do a lot of telling instead of showing in this paragraph and in the previous paragraph. But you have to know like what you're using those details for. And right now, I think you're still trying to figure out what am I trying to say about these murals, and what are these murals trying to say about the town. So reach out to me, reach out to a Writing Center, tutor. Happy to help you figure this out. For me, the setting paragraph was probably the weakest link. It seemed like that's where the least amount of detail was included. I think you need detail in the other two paragraphs, but here it felt like you were kind of floundering and not quite sure where you were going to go with that paragraph. If I have that wrong and there's something more important that you were trying to say there, speak up and let me know. We can talk about that. So one way to kind of think, I try to get you to think of different ways that you could just explain the rebuilding idea. But you might think about, and I thought of it as I was reading this part right here, how a community grew from tragedy and ended up making the town better than it once was. Maybe ask yourself, what was it about the town that helped it rebuild or become better than it once was? I think that could be something to think about to get you to a more useful thesis statement or useful argument. Okay, so that's my feedback. There's a bit going on there. Just to recap, that thesis statement's going to need, I have tweak here. I think it needs a little bit more than a tweak. Need more details in your body paragraphs. Need to explain connections between those details and your thesis statement or the paragraph's overall claim. Still need sources in your paper, and that's fine to not have that in a draft, but it needs to be in the division, and there needs to be a reason why you've organized paragraphs in the location you have them, and there should be transitions between those ideas. So there's a fair bit going on. Again, you're writing about two really good murals. They totally work, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. So reach out to me or a Writing Center tutor and get the help you need to get this essay where it needs to be. All right, Makenna, that's it. I'll talk to you soon.